The following is a transcript between Matías De Stefano, referred to as me, and his higher self, referred to as I am, originally produced on November 9th, 2020, in the mental week under the constellation of Scorpio, examining through the knee chakra. Me. During yesterday's alignment, a serpent teacher spoke. His presence is already familiar to me, and every day I feel more how he is willing to collaborate with our network. He is the first Dark One who came to help us in our initiatic path along the Nile, and he taught people what unconditional love truly means. Many always wait for him to come back because he is very direct in what he says, and yesterday he was, as always. He reminded us that the reptilian brain is the one that knows how about survival in this world, and that if we want to learn to live in harmony on Earth, the first thing we must heal and integrate is the brain, based on hunger, security, survival, and reproduction. Most of the people who walk towards the light and the spirit of consciousness tend to move away from these four concepts, which is why they are the main ones who appear as conflicts. The masters of darkness say, "Look at us and listen to what we have to explain to you." Sometimes I feel that in the spiritual world, you want to start the house from the roof, and you first have to dig and lay a foundation. Every human being is so immersed in basic needs that he does whatever it takes to cover them without measuring the consequences, and in greed, he seeks power, control, and accumulation of goods. The Master told us yesterday bluntly, "You blame the reptilians for controlling your lives, but it is time to recognize that you are the reptilians." And that is the great truth. We humans are the ones who act like reptiles, fighting for the most basic needs as if we are still animals. He told us that if we want to transform ourselves, we must change our skin and know how to do it. It is as if we were asking a pigeon for advice about how to crawl on the ground. Only a snake can explain that to us, and we are more like that than pigeons. He said that they will control our systems until we stop acting like children and start taking responsibility without blaming anyone outside of us for our own hardships. I am. He's right. And in other words, you are precious gems wrapped in your own shit. Me, I know it. His words are harsh but clear, and the truth is overwhelming for most because it takes us out of the illusion that makes us put our feet on the ground and recognize that things are not going to be corrected by thinking pretty, in the same way that a house that's fallen down in a storm won't rise again on prayers. This breaking down of a belief and value system. I am but a rupture that makes you grow. Like when you find out how babies are made or that Santa Claus doesn't exist. When you have the first big argument with your parents, when your heart is broken for the first time, or the moment when they betrayed you. When you have to move from schools or a house or a city or a country, and when you suffer an accident, and when you discover that what you have been told is not true. When you face your first empathy, and when you first awaken your consciousness, when you fall into the deepest depressions. Me, it is as if the mind and the soul and the body break in two. They split in the middle, a before and an after, between conscious and unconsciousness. I am. It's called crisis. Me. And how do you define crisis? I am. It comes from the Greek word Korean, and it means divide, split, or separate. In the mind, the word Korean has given us the concept of criterion. That is, the ability to discern or to separate things, to classify them. Having criteria is knowing how to understand the things well and to place them where they belong. The soul we have the concept of criticism, which speaks of identifying disparities, what is not correct, what is harmonic from what is unbalanced, and disseminates them accordingly to the taste. the sensory perceptions, and therefore the emotions of each individual. In the body, Korean has given us the word crisis. That is, when we carry out an action that separates what comes before from what comes after, like a path that ends and another that begins. Me. But we call the physical crisis the same as the emotional and the mental. An emotional crisis is a crisis of belief. A physical crisis, I am, yes, because crisis refers to the act of cutting with something previous. So it relates to every level where a cut happens. Every crisis is an opportunity to restart from zero, start a new path, but crises are not necessary. Me, and why do we live with them? I am, because as much as people ask for changes, nobody wants to change. To change things, it is essential that all of the subjects involved transform themselves and begin to modify their way of life, of thinking, of relating to themselves, others, and the environment, as well as their daily activities. For convenience, nobody wants to make a transformation. Cells cling to what they can, to what they have and have produced, as a way of ensuring survival. For this reason, the excess energy is accumulated in the form of lipids so as not to discard anything. If I continue to accumulate without changing my diet, sooner or later those lipids will go into the bloodstream. They will generate the cholesterol and clog the veins, causing a heart attack, which we all call change. Crises are changes. They are 180-degree turns that place us at other extremes. Me, in other words, the crises are what we are experiencing because we have not taken responsibility day by day for the things that could harm us. And we wait until the last moment where everything accumulated simply acts violently. I am. Transformation is a long road that involves paying attention to each rock you step on, becoming aware of where it leads you and which rock is best for sustaining your walk. But if you run into the road, accustomed to it, without paying attention to the moments of transformation that life asks for in order to evolve, then one day you'll trip over one of the rocks and you will fall on your face in the ground because of the comfort of everyday life and routine. You will not see that the road is unfinished. And that's where the road splits in two, the break. Me. I've lived it several times. I am. Tell me. Me. Perhaps my first big crisis was the day at school when I was 12 years old, when I began to remember my past. Everything changed for me from there. My guides had been prepping me, but I did not pay attention to what they told me with the necessary seriousness, and this changed the way that I related to the outside world. I became introverted, silent, embarrassed. But the crisis led me to remember and to know everything I know today. Another great crisis was when I was 20 years old at the university, and when at that time it came to start my mission and I refused. But life forced me to leave it. Since I began to channel in the middle of class and lose control of myself, ending up twice in a psychiatric hospital, moments in which I understood that I had to return home, and that's where it all started when they called me to attend congresses, which made me known for the Otter Tumiti talks. The next big crisis that marked me was during the Camino Harwidum in 2012, where in the middle of the way I felt that I was not doing what I should and I got sick. I entered into a great crisis when I arrived into Finisterre in June at the end of the Camino de Santiago. There I met Sobek in this life, and it was at a time that I decided to continue alone, leaving others behind. After this, in 2017, on the path of the dragon, when I drove my car from Argentina to Mexico, knowing that the lakes of the planet's column in which I was facing the strongest personal preparation that I had lived, shattering my mission, my purpose, meanings of everything, with a company that did not seem to understand what was happening to me and that I don't blame for it. The road tore me into 1,000 pieces so that I could find truth behind everything I was doing, and I seemed to run so that that truth would not reach me, although the same was inside of me. In Mexico, I collapsed and I entered a crisis that left me in a state of shock and autism for at least 1 month. This reminded me of my true purpose, the I am. But 2 great crises were missing. In 2018, I would face the strongest love crisis that I had when I recognized that soul in Switzerland who took me to the abyss of emptiness, to nothing. And in 2019, many misunderstandings and betrayals that in just 1 month took me away from all of the film projects, from relationships, from the sponsors of the YOSOY trip, from the large part of my family and friends. I could say that these have been the greatest crises that I have faced in my life so far, and yet here I am. Well, the last crisis is no longer experienced as an ordeal, but as a liberation. I am. Why? Me, because I let go of a lot of weight of prejudices and expectations, many ties of dependencies that prevented me from being myself. All my crises were very painful. Every crisis is for each person from his point of view, and yet I can see that I would not have achieved anything that I did if everything remained the same. I realize that all those crises would have been perfectly avoidable if instead of continuing to push like a stubborn bull, I had taken a moment for contemplation, flexing my mind so I didn't have to break it. The crises were never the problem, but it was not having allowed myself to transform myself along the way. I am. Crisis is like death. It marks the inevitable ending of something for the undeniable beginning of a new path. Death cannot be avoided, but you can prevent it from happening around the corner if you take the correct precautions, pay attention, eat better, listen, know how to discern, be cautious, go step by step. This way you will live much longer, and what were crises before will become evolutionary leaps. But if you can't avoid them, then take advantage of them. Me. Taking charge of the crisis, being responsible for recognizing that one has only led to such a destination and one will only be able to avoid such an end. I am. The crisis then ceases to be seen unconsciously as death to become consciously the resurrection. Me. The next crisis will be my rebirth. I am. And so you will stop having to break yourself into pieces to recognize that they are fractals of the same reality and that you are the eternal, infinite love and constant transformation.